welcome back to another episode of Chalk Talk here on SteelersDepot.com. I am Alex Kozora. As I've talked about on Twitter and mentioned in one of the comments, I think on the Devontae Parker and my mock draft article, I want to do something a little different this week. Instead of me talking, picking a topic, and going to chalk talking to the whiteboard or the pictures, I want to bring it to you guys to get your guys' important questions and kind of go through them and ask me anything type format. Thank you guys so much for your responses. They're a nice pool to choose from. I tried to get to them all. I'm pretty sure I did. If I didn't, though, and you did leave me a question on Twitter or on SteelersDepot.com that I did not address, please let me know in the comments, and I will address it there. So we'll jump right into it. We'll go through the list of questions. We're going to start here with Falcon Safety 43, and he asks, really leaning towards Owambe Adigizua as our first-round pick. What do you think about that? I do like Diggy, as they call him. Owa, they call him a million different things because Owambe Adigizua was difficult to say, like you just saw. I like him as a 4-3 left end, or as even as Dave T. Thomas said, and I'm glad that someone else kind of echoed my thought, maybe even bulk him up and play him as a defensive tackle. I know he's a little undersized, but the length and the strength that he has and how dominant he can be in the run game sometimes, I think really makes him attractive in a 4-3. The issue with him as a 3-4 outside linebacker is I don't see any bend at all. And of course, he's going to be more of a power guy anyway, like Lamar Woodley was. But even Woodley had bend and the ability to turn, flatten, and get upfield, get the edge, and get to the quarterback. I don't see that at all with Adigizua. So that's the rub for me. I don't think he fits as a 3-4 outside linebacker, so I would not be interested. The hip injury scared me too. You're talking about major hip surgery on the left and right hip. You're thinking in the long term, wear and tear on that. Could that create issues later down the road? Another concern I have with Adigizua, so I don't see him as a fit. We go to our next one here, Alejandro Caballero. Hopefully I get these names right. I will try the best I can. If I butcher it, apologize in advance. And he asks to do just a quick breakdown of Marcus Wheaton versus Martavis Bryant. Of course, look at the body type, vastly different. Wheaton, a smaller, shiftier, kind of quick twitch kind of guy. Martavis Bryant, tall, long strider, a build-up speed kind of player. Wheaton, I do want to see him have a real dominant game. I don't think we've really seen that yet, but I like his hands. I thought there was a nice progression with him. Again, year one with the pinky injuries, coming in late, missing time due to NCAA rules coming out of Oregon State. I thought that hindered him. I thought he made progressions in his rookie year on special teams. They were subtle, but they were there, and I thought he made a nice jump in year two. But I want to see really him have that dominant game and that really breakout, everyone check him out kind of game coming into his third year. Martavis Bryant, you know the story with him. This is a guy that once he got himself onto the field, healthy, picked up the playbook, stopped making the mental mistakes that he showed in camp on a pretty much daily basis. He was pretty dominant. Again, I want to see consistency, running the right routes, not dropping passes, all the details and nuances that you're going to expect. But it was a great year one, and I can't wait to see the jump in year two. That's where I know the third year is typically the progression, but in this kind of sped up, so let's see what you have earlier and earlier mentality that we live in. I think that year two now for receivers is a big jump. The game's going to slow down for him a little bit. Training this whole offseason, watching his rookie tape, learning what to do better from it. I think it'll be a big year for Martavis Bryant, and I can't wait to see those results. Next one, Nick Sabatella. He says, would love to see some kind of film breakdown of the best tight end fits in the upcoming draft in rounds 3 through 7. So no Clive Walford, no Max Williams. I don't think I really have time today to go through a film breakdown with it, but I can give you some names. And I've done a couple scouting reports on these later round tight ends. I think this tight end class, I know it's not, top heavy. There's not going to be one in the first round, but I like this tight end class. I like guys like Tyler Kroft from Rutgers, who could go maybe 4 or 5, who's dealt with an injury that's kind of hurt him throughout this pre-draft process. I think he's a big frame. I think he runs well. I think he's a good athlete for his size. Experience as a blocker at Rutgers. His frame just poses the natural matchup problems. He kind of played in the slot, played an inline tight end. Again, was asked to block a good bit, something some of these tight ends aren't asked to do. I think he got put in a bad situation in 2014, why he declared early, playing with Gary Nova as his quarterback, who's not a good quarterback, in a new coaching scheme, a new offensive coordinator that really hindered his numbers. You look at the 2013 tape and the numbers, I think they're more accurate of the player Tyler Kroft can be. Devin Mahina, a 7th round, possible undrafted free agent kid. I really like him. Long, lean tight end that has good arm extension and can down block, has to get better in his upper body. And be able to base block better, but wasn't used a lot at BYU, played about 25% of the snaps. He's a good athlete that locates the ball well, is a long strider, hands extended away from his body, competitive, played in, I think, the East-West game and the NFLPA Bowl game. He's 26, and that might be turning some people off. But if I give a 26-year-old 7th-round pick and I get him through all 4 years of his rookie contract, that's probably one of my best 7th-round picks that you're going to have. So I think later in the rounds, age becomes less of an issue. First round, Danny Watkins, 26-year-old, a guy that you want to have for 10 years, you don't want to do that. But 7th-rounder, if I get 4 years out of him, I'm pretty happy. Another kid, Gene Surfin from UMass, skinny lower body, same issue. He's 28 years old, but it doesn't matter as much in the later rounds. A couple other guys, Cameron Clear, Steelers have looked at him. Blocking type, only had 5 catches last year. Some off-the-field issues. Kicked out of Tennessee for stealing a laptop. Went to Arizona Western, where Randy Gregory and E.J. Bibbs were at, and then he transferred to Texas A&M. But a blocker, which is the type the Steelers like, of course, with a little bit of sneaky athleticism. And really, again, was not used very much at Texas A&M in their spread, kind of 10 personnel offense. Nick Boyle out of Delaware, wanting to get some tape on him. I think he fits the Steelers mold well of a blocker first with some sneaky athleticism. Saw him hurdle in the Senior Bowl, did that throughout the season at Delaware. I think he fits the kind of tight end the Steelers are looking for, Nick Boyle. So there you go on that. Johnny Luce says, if I could find the time to break down Cam Thomas' 2014 campaign, I don't want to be the guy that harps on Cam Thomas like everybody else. We're well aware of who he is and who he isn't. But in his defense, as the year went on, he got benched for Stephon Tuitt. He played a little bit better as a rotational end coming in fresh. It's a bad situation, asked to play a lot of positions he didn't. He was a one tech who got moved to 5 because he got benched in San Diego, but really was not asked to ever be a full-time 5 tech. It was a really ugly situation for him to be in. I didn't think it was really a good fit, and I didn't think he really ever had a chance to be successful. I think as a bit part, he could be a little bit better. I thought you saw some flashes of that late in 2014. Now, don't misunderstand me. This team needs to upgrade its 3rd rotational defensive end. Tough to do, poor free agent class. They didn't make any moves, and the draft class at 5 tech is pretty poor. But I think he could be a little bit better than what he was in 2014, though granted, that's not saying much. Next up is Matt Manzo. He says, which of the outside linebackers other than Jarvis Jones, James Harrison, and Arthur Moats has the best chance of making the team or practice squad? Tough answer, Matt. I can't really say it for sure. These guys are all things behind closed doors. Howard Jones, what's his progression been like after training camp? You didn't get to see him, so I don't know where he's at. Sean Lemon, CFL kid, they know more about him than I do, so it's really tough to try to project these guys. I'd like to think, though, with how inactive this team was at outside linebacker in free agency, that they feel some sort of optimism, not comfort, but optimism about a guy like Howard Jones. I'm interested in seeing his jump in year 2. Again, a D2 kid from Shepherd, head spinning, didn't have to drop that much at Shepherd. Maybe a year under his belt could really improve him and see some nice progression with him. But again, don't get too caught up in that. We've seen Adrian Robinson, we've seen Alan Baxter. Those kids more often miss than they hit. Next up, B&G with a good question. Let's see here. Whether the zero tech is still viable in today's NFL, or maybe better phrase, still worth a high draft pick. That's an interesting question. We know that this is becoming a sub-package league, and you basically play more nickel as much or more so than your base 3-4 or 4-3. Steelers from week 8 on last year played 52% in their nickel defense. Does the zero tech still have value? I say yes. You still want guys to stuff the run on 1st and 10, put teams in 3rd and long. I think the defensive line scope, and this is defensive end and defensive tackle, regardless of really what you are, 3-4 or 4-3, has changed from a bunch of run stuffers. We always wanted, okay, just stuff the run, take on blockers, and hold the point of attack, to the complete package. Now you want guys with great first steps, long arms, good athletes that can get after the quarterback, like Cam Hayward, like Stephon Tuitt. They're not just run stuffers. They are the whole package. They're guys that can get after the quarterback and hold their own against the run as well. That's what they're built to be. I think nose tackle becomes the same. Well, you need to find those rare breeds, those big dancing bears like Haloti Ngata, Brandon Williams last year at the Ravens. Those kind of guys that can give you something in sub-package football, so you don't have to automatically take them off the field anytime you go nickel. You can put him into 3 tech in some situations. Eddie Goldman, Dave Bryan talked about him. He's starting to convince me a little bit. I love Eddie Goldman. Great athlete with a lot of strength and ox, big lower body that can hold the point of attack even against double teams. He gives you that whole complete package. Those are the types of guys they need. So to answer your question, the traditional can't move a lick kind of nose tackles phased out, but you still need a nose tackle that can do that and be a good athlete. I know the big question is Steve McClendon, and I think it was part of his B&G's comment about zone blocking schemes, because you need those guys that can move and flow down the line. But you absolutely still have value of guys that can take up space and force runners to go in a different direction, bouncing it outside, or not giving them a cutback lane, or whatever the case. Next one, Brian Miller says, Alex, why do you think the front office has been so quiet on the free agent cornerback market? I think Kevin Colbert kind of answered this. They attempted. They brought in Sterling Moore, Patrick Robinson. They had a contract offer to Bryce McCain. It just didn't work out. And this is a team that's never going to spend big money on corners, who were very expensive this offseason. Not like 2 years ago when nobody got paid at all. This year, cornerback price way up. And I think that just circumstance happened. And I think that it's not a product of not trying, but a product of it just didn't work out. So I think that's the reason why. Plus, this quarterback class in the draft this year is very deep. Next up, Falcon safety 43 again. He says, if the Steelers go cornerback in the first round, did they get an outside linebacker that turns into anything out of this draft? As I mentioned on today's The Terrible Podcast, I don't think this edge class is as good as we originally thought. I think there's some guys at the top, but as you start getting really out of round one, out of round two, the names really aren't there, and I don't get as excited about guys. They all have some pretty significant problems. Can Trey Flowers be a premier pass rusher? Can Marcus Golden play the run? Didn't really have to do it a lot at Missouri. Max Valles, do you see any special dominant traits there, or more of just a well-rounded game? Those are the kinds of things. A bunch of small school kids making the jump. Davis Toole, Kyle Emanuel, Zach Wagenman. Can they make the jump from the FCS level up? Does that mean that they can get somebody who turns into something? Absolutely. You know, could Eli Harold drop? Potentially. Could Nate Orchard be there? I think he will. I think it's just a little bit tougher if they go cornerback in the first round, because I think that it becomes a lot hazier at outside linebacker. I think we'll get into that a little bit later as well. And I mentioned this on the Terrible Podcast, too, about should it be cornerback or outside linebacker if you had to choose in the first round. Though, again, Kevin Colbert could go in a whole different direction. Next up, Schoolhouse Rock says, do you think Ifo Ekpre Alamu will be there for the third round for the Steelers? And if so, do you see the Steelers taking them? I don't know if he'll be there or not. ACLs don't really scare me the way that they used to. Aaron Colvin last year for the Jaguars, I think he came back about 6 or 8 weeks after tearing it, about a similar time frame, I believe, as Ifo did. I don't think he gets to the third. As deep as his corner class is, and as much as it pushes people down, I don't think a guy that could have been in the first round discussion pre-torn ACL is going to drop all the way to the third. You know, just because guys recover so quickly, you have the PUP list to put them on now. I don't think he falls. If he is there, do the Steelers take him? It all depends on the board. Realizing, though, for the Steelers situation, you know, if you're missing all that time, not getting on that moving train, as Tomlin talks about, if they're willing to basically wait a year and use this as a redshirt year, then they could and should take him. If not, they want to go on and look in a different direction. Depends on the impact they want year one, basically. Matt Manzo, again, says, how about going over all the crazy things Dave T said during the podcast? And we talked about that on the Terrible Podcast with Dave Bryan that went up yesterday by the time you see this video. Yeah, now to preface, he knows infinitely more than I will ever know. And you got to take his opinion, even if it's a little bit out of left field. Trust the guy, because he's done crazy, you know, amount of tape. I mean, you can just hear it whenever you listen to the podcast, which you must check out. I don't see Shaq Thompson as a fit for the Steelers. I see him as a 4-3 outside linebacker, maybe a strong safety for some teams, not a 3-4 outside linebacker. He said Eric Rowe. You know, as I said on the Terrible Podcast, I thought he kind of helped turn me on Eric Rowe in a good way and bump him up a little bit, because he is a long corner with nice size, cornerback safety versatility, who's a great, you know, athlete, vertical leap and high point the football. He does that very, very well. Has all the base traits you look for in the position that could boost his value. I don't know if I see first round, but you could see, you know, mid-second round, I think is a good home for Eric Rowe. Ryan Shazier, outside linebacker. I know I floated this around. I think over winter, I think it was. I don't really remember for sure. I've come off that a little bit. I don't really see Shazier as a 3-4 outside linebacker. Even if I did, I recognize it's probably not going to happen. He is light, and that is not really ideal to be a guy that can set the edge as an outside linebacker. So Ryan Shazier, probably not going to happen. But it was interesting, and I like being a little off the cuff, out of the box. I think it promotes discussion. I hate getting stale in the draft, and sometimes I feel like even myself, we get a little too stale talking about the same 10 guys. Big pool of guys, 256 players will be selected. We need to talk about some other players and have some different ideas. We'll go to Twitter now. This is John Stewart at 21JJSS. In round 6, if all are available, who do you pick? Zach Wegeman, Lyndon Trail, or Kyle Emanuel. I want to get tape on Zach Wegeman. I think there's a little bit out there. I want to try to get a little bit more before I dive into him, but I watched him at the NFLPA bowl game, loved his first step, the production, 37.5 career sacks, though to be fair, Emanuel, I think he's even topped that in his sack total. Chris did the report on Kyle Emanuel, who the Steelers have shown interest in. So it will probably come down to one of those two, though I don't really see Emanuel dropping that far, but I know we don't have to worry about that just for the sake of the question. I would not take Lyndon Trail, though. I know he has a nice body type. He's a big guy, long, but he's very stiff. He's a tweener. Where is his true home? Watching him at some of his workouts, I just don't see it with Lyndon Trail. I think he's just one of those stiff guys. He might be a good straight line athlete, but change of direction and fluidity, I don't see it as a 3-4 outside linebacker. At Steel 420, is James Vaughters a candidate for Steelers outside linebacker? I'm going to be honest, I don't know a ton about Vaughters. I know he had a good pro day, according to Tony Pauline. Who was fairly productive. I think metrically he was one of the most productive pass rushers out of Stanford. 6'1", 258, I believe is what he was listed. I'm not sure what he actually weighed in at his pro day at off the top of my head. Could be another one of those interesting late round guys that we'll try to get to him on SteelersDepot.com. Jim Goodrich, longtime follower at, what do you want to call it? Igwa, I think it is 9. Igwa 9, we'll go with that. He says, would you compare Blake to McCain in your chalk talk? Well, I'll just talk about it really quick here. Obviously, I think McCain was the veteran that had the experience, the reps. I thought route recognition and just mentally above the shoulders. He was above Antoine Blake, which you would expect based off the time they've served in the league. And McCain had the versatility of being able to play slot and outside cornerback, left cornerback. So I thought that's what he had over Antoine Blake. Blake is the talent, the physical in terms of the speed, the fluidity. McCain didn't have that. McCain got burned a couple times last year, and it didn't show up because the quarterback didn't find him, didn't complete the pass. But there were some times on tape where McCain got burned bad. I think the Colts game, T.Y. Hilton, I think got him once that wasn't completed, wasn't thrown that way. So Blake, the physical tools, the straight line speed, fluidity, the hips, the click and close. Blake has that head and shoulders above Bryce McCain. So that's what it came down to. Blake does not have the reps, and you saw some mental mistakes from Antoine Blake because he's a young guy who didn't have those reps that Bryce McCain has. Last one, Carlos at CA_SALASV. Was not going to try to pronounce it because I just don't know how, and I don't want to embarrass myself. He says, if Kevin Colbert said that a rookie cornerback won't be considered to be a starter, is it worth it to draft one in rounds 1 or 2? Yes, it is, because it depends on what Colbert means by starter. If that means your base outside corners, he could be meaning a nickel corner, and nickel corners are basically starters today. In today's NFL. So I think there's still a lot of value in that. If you want to help, the Steelers would love to be able to sit guys in the first round each year for a year or two, like the old traditional method. Let them grow and learn, and then play them out there. Circumstances have changed that. Ryan Shazier is a classic example of that last year. No strong inside linebacker candidate, though I'm always still a big fan of Vince Williams on Twitter as well. So I think that's still ideal. I want to touch on just what I mentioned before, outside linebacker, cornerback in the first round. Like I said on the Terrible Podcast, I think this edge rusher class is not as deep as corner, so I'd be more inclined to take an outside linebacker if there was one available, though it gets a little bit slim picking at 22. If Dupre and Beasley isn't there, where you go? Then cornerback, because I feel like if you wait on outside linebacker, you start really having problems trying to find a guy that fits well. I think they're harder to project, so you want to take a top talent that might be a little bit easier to project. If you take a later round guy with some flaws, and the small school guys, have to remember that too, it's a lot tougher to project them than it is a cornerback. Cornerback, they're not obviously 100% success rate, but it's just easier to see them on tape and evaluate a corner playing cornerback than it is an outside linebacker edge prospect who's playing with his hand into the dirt 80–85% of the time and saying, how is he going to do transitioning to playing a 3-4 outside linebacker? It's a tougher projection. I think you're more inclined to go with top-end talent that you've seen maybe drop in coverage more on tape in the early rounds, which is why I'm such a big fan of Bud Dupre, because I think he's an easier projection than you have in previous years. One last thing, someone said it to me on Twitter or just Depot, doesn't really matter. Someone asked about Antoine Blake, how many touchdowns he gave up last year. I believe it was 4, and then 3 of them came inside the 5. So you see red zone issues, teams picking on Antoine Blake. I don't remember who said that, so apologize, but I do want to get in there that stat last second. Thank you guys for watching very much. Steelers Ask Me Anything. If you have any other questions that you forgot, you didn't see it in time, you didn't get a chance to ask, please leave it in the comments. I will try to get to it. And obviously anything that I might have missed leading up to this video, please drop me a note on Steelers Depot. Keep up with Dave's stuff, Matthew's as well, Chris's, Luke. His big board comes, I think, every Monday. We're going to go 2 more times to get up to 100 total prospects. As a draft, what I think at the video right now, 22 days away, I think it is. Crazy, crazy. We're going to hit 100 draft reports, scouting reports for the year. For sure. I think we're about sitting 90 right now as of this video, so I'm really excited about that. We're going to have more mock drafts from, I'm sure, Chris, myself, and Dave Bryan. Keep up with Matthew's stuff as well. He does some great content as well, looking at some different aspects that are not always draft-related. And as always, keep it here on SteelersDepot.com.